What's up, Packers fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Draft brought to you by Badger State Brewing. Today, we're not talking about a Badger, we are talking about a Wolverine and one of my favorite prospects in the draft in Michigan Wolverine Nickelback, Mike Sainristil. Now, I just want to get one thing out of the way, and this is going to be a heavy topic of conversation as we discuss Mikey. He is a player. As much as I like him, and I just redid my big board today, I'm not 100% sure when you guys are getting this. It's hard to always keep track of the days because I do pre-record the prospect primers. We'll stop doing that once we get to guys that are scheduled after the combine because we'll want that data. But you might notice 2 or 3 episodes where I'm wearing the same thing, and that's because the prospect primers are getting done ahead of time, and I think getting done the right way. So I don't have a huge problem with that. But looking at Big Board 2.0 here, I do have Mikey at player 82. He's got a solid round 3 grade for me. I just gave away the end here, but he could be a player, guys, that's just off Green Bay's board, and I'm not alone in liking him. In fact, Dane Brugler, again, you guys are getting this show plenty after Dane did this, but Dane dropped his top 100 over on The Athletic. Dane is, I think, one of the top draft guys in the media, does his own work, and is a brilliant guy. And I just have a tremendous amount of respect for Dane. He had Mikey as 60th overall. I don't know if that means a round 2 grade for him. I don't really know Dane's grading system, but 60th overall, which is, I think I love Mikey Sainristil. And he's got him 22 spots ahead of where I have him. So that's kind of part of the conversation, folks, is there is a player who, one of the brightest draft guys, one of the brightest analysts in our game, in our prognostication or our projection game here, the draft Twitter that I am so humbly a part of, thinks is a easy, top 2 round guy, top 64 guy, 60th overall, and he might not even be on Green Bay's board. Why, Ross? Why would Mike Sainristil still be on Green Bay's board? Well, he plays nickel, and while that doesn't disqualify him, the Packers just don't take short corners. Okay, there's one report. So we're talking about. I'm going to jump around for just 1 second. When we talk about the thresholds, we talk about Packer people. We talk about the draft guide, guys. Buy the draft guide. The pre-order should be right down there in the link. Promo code DAILY. Check it out. But when Jake Stack or Jacob Morley on Twitter talks about Packer people and tier 1 fits and tier 2 fits and tier 3 fits, the Packers just aren't really taking guys that are not 5'10" or 7/8 or taller at corner. It's just not what they do. Okay. That is why Jaire was such a surprise. I got to check on. So he's listed at 5'10", and I'm trying to sniff through here, kind of what his exact combine height was. And Brian Gutekunst once called him right on the Mendoza line, meaning that Ja was probably about as short as they would even agree to take. And if it sounds like I'm mumbling here, I am trying to find Jaire's 4-digit. I'm trying to find Jaire's 4-digit or exact height, just because I do think he was an outlier. So he's a 5'10" and a quarter, Ja, which makes him, again, there are tier 2 fits, right? There are guys that Green Bay takes that don't check every box, right? But he certainly checked their other boxes, which would be running a 4.6 or faster 40 and a 7-second or faster 3-cone. His 3-cone was a ridiculous 6.71. That was almost the 90th percentile all time at corner. And, ran the 40 in a blazing 4.38. So the Packers were willing to, go that extra half inch that Jaire was shorter. And like Brian said, he was right on the Mendoza line. He was right on the line of, will we be comfortable with that or not? Now, Sainristil is listed at 5'10" by Michigan. But there are some reports that they had sort of a official ranking, or not ranking, that's not the right word, official measurement in the spring at Michigan. And he weighed in, he being Mikey Sainristil, at 5'9" and a quarter and 184 pounds. Folks, that is just not something that Green Bay has done in the past. Okay. I'm not saying they won't do it. I'm not saying that they're completely opposed to it and just, refuse. But if Mikey doesn't run super fast, I'm not too worried about that 7-second 3-cone, because he showed short area quickness to me. But 5'9" and a quarter is just not something they're doing, or historically, it's not something they're doing. And I mean, when he stands next to other defensive backs for Michigan, he looks short. But for my money, the best nickel in college football this year, and I'm not actually sure it was close. To me, I don't think it was close. Now, a lot of the best nickels in the NFL were outside guys in college that kind of got pushed inside for this, that, or the other reason, or even safeties that play a little down there. Trent McDuffie played plenty of outside corner at Washington, and now he's the NFL's probably best nickel for the Chiefs. You don't always draft college nickels to play nickel in the pros. You draft maybe good corners that are like 5'11", 5'10", that tackle well, that maybe don't have a ton of long speed but have good short area quickness. That's an NFL nickel. It's not always, okay, who are the best nickelbacks in college? Now, how do I, now they're going to play nickel in the NFL. For me, I think the best nickel in this class is Cooper DeJean. He didn't play nickel the last couple of years at Iowa. Played a little bit. I've watched his slot snaps, and they're cool, but, that's not the position that he played primarily for Iowa towards the end of his career. Terrion Arnold, same thing. Ennis Rakestraw, same thing. Those are guys that have played slot in college, but, when their teams needed them, they played outside corner as well. I think they potentially have Trent McDuffie upside at the slot position. So this is Mikey Sainristil, a real live slot receiver in college, slot corner in college, real live nickel, and 60th overall for Dane Brugler, 82nd overall for me. Is he a guy that the Packers would even consider? All right, let's dive into the pros. I love him very, very much. I know so does Jacob Westendorf. Jacob is a longtime friend of mine, podcast partner, and huge Michigan fan. And I know that Mikey's performance in the college football playoff was very special to Jacob, but I love him. He came up big in big moments, right? That he played big when it was important to play big, and that's key, right? His pick in the national championship game against Washington was something that was very, very impressive to watch. And again, it was a big play in a big moment, and I love him. I do. He's the prototype in the nickel corner. He's the prototype. Is a very, very good football player. He's just a little bit short. Antoine Winfield Sr. And that's not my player comp for him, but Antoine Winfield Sr. was a very short cornerback that was good enough, crazy as it was, to hold up outside. But as it got to be later in his career, the Vikings just figured out, and I think even the Bills in the later part of his Bills before he moved to Minnesota, they just figured out oh no, Antoine is just the best nickel in football. If it wasn't Charles Woodson, it was Antoine Winfield. And if Mikey tests well and hits his 90th percentile outcome, that's Antoine Winfield Sr. is what that is, that prototype. He's an incredibly aware and instinctive football player. You got to be. If he really is 5'9" and a corner, you better know what you're doing, because you're not going to be a physical mismatch for most of the guys you're trying to cover. He understands route concepts, and he definitely understands what happens in the middle of the field as a pass defender. And to me, that was something that was so missing from Joe Barry's defense. And look, I think that'll change in general. Just listening to understanding, watching film on Jeff Hafley's defenses at Ohio State and in San Francisco, and ultimately even at BC, and just listening to defensive backs, specifically Tayshaun Gibson, Richard Sherman, guys that have played for him, and just talk about the way he makes the game plan easy, the way that the guys know where they're supposed to be. I mean, to me, that was one of the biggest things, aside from the passivity and aside from the inability to stop the run at times. The biggest thing for me that drove me insane about Joe Barry's defense was just watching these guys run across the middle of the field wide open on these deep overs, and Quay just not knowing where to go, or Campbell not knowing where to go, or Keyshawn not knowing where to be, or one of the safeties not passing off a route. Guys just 18, 23, 26 yards down the field on these crossers uncovered. As JT O'Sullivan on the QB school would call them, college open, truly college open. I mean, just wide the hell open. And that part was frustrating. And I think it's something that can be fixed by better players, Mike Sainristil, or fixed just by Jeff Hafley being a better football coach or a better defensive coordinator than Joe Barry. And I think the communication part in the back end is just going to improve because of who the coach is. But smarter football players, more instinctive football players, they would help. Tons of snaps in college, a very, very experienced player, basically every down, and didn't play a ton his first 2 years, but then played 689 snaps in 2022 and 684 snaps in 2023. And I believe Michigan was in the college football playoff both times. And in the conference championship game both times. So he had 2 long seasons. So not so much experience that you're worried about the wear and tear on his body, especially since he's not a huge guy. But once he broke the lineup, he just didn't come off the field. Like I said, 700 snaps on defense. I don't even know if he contributed on special teams or not, but 700 snaps basically each season on defense in a long college season. He's seen it all in the Big Ten. And then in the playoffs, against the SEC, against the Pac-12, he's seen it all. Mike Sainristil has seen it all. He's a butt kicker in the run game, man, especially for players of his size. He tackles well, understands leverage, understands like his responsibilities when he is fitting the run. And, I've seen, the basic numbers here, 7 missed tackles per season on 700 snaps. That is not a number that the Packers secondary has, especially somebody who would play as much as that. Like their guys, especially their full timers, would have more than 7 missed tackles and 2 forced fumbles. As a tackler, as in 2023, I like him defending the run, even at his size. I like him defending the run, unless obviously the opposing running back is just enormous, and then you're going to have a physical mismatch. There's no getting around that. But he plays the run really, really well for a guy of his size. 20 quarterback pressures and 4 sacks, meaning that he does understand like his role as a blitzer when called upon. I think that's impressive, right? I think that's a key thing. DB pressure is cool when it works, and especially from that star position. I think people remember all the havoc that Charles Woodson created, and he was really. I mean, Tremont did a good job, but the last time the Packers had a true game changer at star at nickel was Charles Woodson, and he won a defensive MVP in 2009 playing that spot primarily, and pass rush was a big part of that. And of course not every down, like he's not Jamal Adams, but the ability to put heat on the quarterback, the ability to finish 4 sacks for a nickel corner in 2 years, it's impressive to me. Okay. His back pedal is super smooth. In fact, everything he does is super smooth. That's one of the things, there's a kind of a line, right, where one of the things I talk about when, for example, people were in my mentions about it, and that's fine. Rasul Douglas. Oh, they should have never traded Rasul. Okay. All things equal, I would rather have Rasul Douglas and a 5th round pick right now than the 3rd round pick, the late 3 that they got from Buffalo. I would. With that said, though, you're in a weird position then, in my opinion, with the emergence of Carrington Valentine personnel-wise, because Carrington Valentine, to me, does not show what you need to play in the nickel spot. Jaire does, but you're not going to do it on anything else but 3rd and long, because at his size, with his shoulder issues and his back issues, you're not going to have him fill the C gap and the D gap. You're not going to have him as a primary run defender on outside runs, taking on fullbacks, taking on pulling guards, or doing whatever. I mean, that's not every day for the nickel, but it's plenty, and you're not going to have Jaire do it. I don't think Stokes is a nickel. I don't think Valentine is a nickel. And I don't think Rasul is a nickel. I didn't like what I saw in Green Bay when they tried to play him inside. I didn't think it made sense. I didn't think it played to his strengths. So while Rasul Douglas would be a better outside corner across from Jaire than most, if not all, of the Packers' options, we'll see how the board falls here, he still would have created a weird spot in the pecking order, or a weird roster situation. Now, what doesn't Rasul have for inside? Twitch, right? And so the change of direction, the wiggle, that's something that Rasul Douglas didn't have in spades. Great football player, awesome outside corner, which, by the way, is more valuable and harder to find. but doesn't have the twitch and the wiggle and the looseness in his hips to play nickel. And Sainristil for sure does. Now, is he twitchy? Is he bursty? We're going to find out at the NFL Combine. But as far as being smooth and able to change direction and fluid in his hips and fluid in his ankles, that's Mikey Sainristil to me. Cons, he's just not very big. Listed at 5'10", might be 5'9", might be sub 190. Bigger, faster, stronger is better, and Mikey Sainristil is not that. Although we don't know what he's gonna run, but he's not big, and that in my opinion, if he were 5'11 and a half, 205, probably be a first round pick, even as a primarily inside corner, but he's not. He'll turn 24 during his rookie season. So, in general, I think he might just be a low ceiling player. But hey, if that ceiling is above average nickel for 10 years, I'm in. And I'd burn a 2 on that. I'd for sure burn a 3 on that. Absolutely. I don't think I see elite long speed on film. Probably won't matter because he's not going to play outside in the league, but he might not be super fast. And if you're going to play some cover zero, he could get beat deep. He could get, if your blitz, your 6-man pressure, whatever, if you're playing zero, doesn't get home, his long speed and his height might be a problem if you're not going to protect him. But most of the time in a cover 3, cover 1, cover 2, whatever, your nickel's protected. So that's not a massive concern. And I will say the lack of size does show up when he's trying to tackle larger backs or big tight ends. Gets wide receivers on the ground just fine. There are big wide receivers in the NFL, good yak wide receivers. Like, I don't know if I'd want him to try to tackle Deebo Samuel. Like, that doesn't sound super exciting to me. But in general, like, he's a good tackler. Like I mentioned, a couple forced fumbles, gets guys on the ground, low missed tackle percentage, tackles well on film, good form. I like it. Derrick Henry's going to run him over probably, right? And A.J. Dillon might run him over if A.J. Dillon plays for a different team. Bijan Robinson might run him over. Like, the big tight ends too. If somebody flexes out a tight end, I'd be concerned with him on Sam Laporta. I'd be concerned with him on TJ Hawkinson. Those things would concern me. And again, these guys, like, we have to talk about the cons because they're not all perfect prospects. I would not have a round 3 grade on Mikey Sainristil if he was a perfect prospect. Packers fit. And this is the $1 million question, right? I think theoretically he's a great fit. They don't have a nickel corner. I would not play Keyshawn Nixon on defense again. I know there's been some conjecture about him playing safety. I don't know that he tackles well enough to do that. I don't know that he's fast enough to do that. I don't know that he's instinctive enough to do that. I would not. That is not something I would try. Anything other than you're our 5th safety and our primary kick returner, and we're not going to let you be the nickel anymore. Nobody else on the roster, as I mentioned, looks like a nickel. None of the other corners really project as inside cornerbacks. So, when I mentioned Ja's not going to do it, Carrington Valentine doesn't make sense, and Eric Stokes doesn't make sense. So that makes him a great fit. But literally every chance in the world that he's not even on their board. And again, when Brian Gutekunst says Mendoza line, he is significantly shorter than that Mendoza line. And if Jaire was about the shortest corner they'll take, and that's good for them and good on them for trusting their scouting and not allowing a little bit of gray area, not just being like, okay, he's not 5'10 and 3/4, so we can't draft him. Well, they drafted an all-pro by kind of breaking what they like to do. Mikey Sainristil would really be breaking what they like to do. As I mentioned, Green Bay wants you to be at least 5'10 and 7/8. He's not that. He's not. I don't know if he's 5'9 and 1/4, like this spring measurement that has been used, but he's not 5'10 and 7/8. I'll tell you that right now. He should crack I think he'll crack the 4.6 40 that they have as a requirement. He's going to need to have that elite 3 cone time because you can't be a tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 fit or a non-fit and be on the Packers board. So if he has poor agilities at that size, he could run a 4.31 in the 40. They're not going to be interested at 5'9" and running a slow 3 cone time. Okay. They're not going to be interested in a small player with poor agilities that runs fast. They're just not. He needs, if he's going to be short, which he can't help, you go to bed, hanging upside down and try and get taller, but it ain't going to work. He has to hit the speed and he has to hit the agilities. And the Packers have to be willing to treat nickel as a different position, as they did, right? Amari Rodgers did not fit their athletic profile. Neither did Jaden Reed. Keep those two things in mind as they identified the slot wide receiver position as a specific spot in the offense that they would make specific concessions for. Will they treat the defensive side of the ball that way? Will Jeff Heffley suggest that they do? I don't know. What he would be, day one starter at nickel. Day one, inside corner, number one, done. Period, done. Ultimately, though, guys, somebody else is going to take him. One of the other 31 teams is going to take him. I'd be happy to be wrong. Okay? Happy to be wrong. One of the other 31 NFL teams, in my opinion, is going to take Mike Sainristil. Overall, for me, he's got a round 3 grade. He's my my 82nd. That guy got an update for Big Board 2.0 there. My 82nd player overall, and I think this whole thing has a chance to be wishful thinking. Speaking of wishes, what are my wishes? My wish for you is that you purchase the Green Bay Draft Guide powered by Packer Report. We should have a pre-order link right in the show description, whether you're listening on a podcast or you are watching here on YouTube. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, 10% off with the code DAILY. That's DAILY as in the Daily Draft. Check me out. I'm at Ross Uglem on X, formerly known as Twitter. Check us out on Packer Report. Become a VIP. The first month is always just $1 if you want to check out what we are about, or if you want to check out one of the annual options. Those are always discounted as well. A lot of really good people and a lot of really smart Packers people are putting the time in there, and that's the best way to support us. Speaking of support, like, subscribe, do all of the things that you're supposed to do here with the Pack a Day podcast. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and go Pack Go.